Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations. I'm MIT Janelle, joined by the beautiful women of Conversations. So glad that you are here on today. And we want to take the time to say thank you to the executive producer of our show, our great man of God, Pastor Tony Smith, for allowing us to be before you on today. We have a very, very serious topic, and one that a lot of times it doesn't get discussed and it gets brushed under the rug, but we thank God for this platform that the man of God has allowed us to have today. And our topic is toxic relationships. And we're not just talking about husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. You can have a toxic relationship with a mother and a daughter, a mother and a son, a father and a son, or even siblings. So we're going to get into the show. So first and foremost, I want to give you what a toxic relationship is, and then we're going to get right into the questions. So a toxic relationship is one that makes you feel unsupported, misunderstood, demeaned, or attacked. On a basic level, it's anything that makes you feel worse than what you already feel. It can become toxic over time. It can exist in any context, from the playground to the boardroom, and it's poison, all right? And it weaves its way through your life, and it eats away at your happiness. For me, when I was reading that, I was like, wow, it eats away at your happiness. Anything that's toxic, what do you think about? Things, surface things, Clorox. Those are the things that, you eat it, you drink it, you die, right? You be in this relationship and it just kills everything that's in you. So let's talk about this, because a lot of relationships ain't happy. A lot of relationships are not healthy, and we got to address it. What are the signs, first and foremost, that you are in a toxic relationship?
I think one of the signs could be the person is very controlling. They want to, clock where you at, where you going, where you been, who you been with, what did you eat, what time did you use the bathroom. Like it's control.
And abusive language, like how a person talk to you, you can even say how a person look at you.
Oh, how they look at you. Because they give you that look and
Yeah.
I would say, not taking accountability. Of course, the Holy Spirit, if we don't feel good in a relationship, I think that's a red flag, but you're not always going to feel good all the time. But if a person is not taking accountability for their role in that, or, blaming you a lot for a lot of things, even if you're taking accountability, I would say that's a red flag to be okay, I know that this is off and you're not trying to change it, or you're not taking accountability for it. This may continue if I allow it.
And I'm going to say, if a person makes you feel insecure about who you are, if you're always trying to do something good for yourself, they're always downing you and telling you not to do it, that is a sign.
Anything else? How about make a person that makes you feel intimidated, right? A person that's always, this really was serious to me. A person that's always dishonest, right? A person that's always lying to you. Man, I was reading one time, I'm not mad that you lied. I'm mad that you think I'm dumb enough to believe you lie, right?
Insulting my intelligence.
Insulting my intelligence. You know, that could become toxic over time. All right, so let's get into this relationship, because we talked about, we got husband and wife. You got toxic relationships between, we said earlier, mothers and daughters. How do you deal with being in a toxic relationship? Do you leave? Do you stay? Do you work on it? Let's talk about it.
Well, I think if you're in a toxic relationship, like with a friend, just a girlfriend or something like that, you're always giving, and that person never give back to you. Not only financial, but giving advice, and giving of yourself, your time, and that person never does that back, never returns it, then the way I would get out of it, I would just walk away, stop doing. I mean, we could still be friends, but I would stop doing things as much as I did.
I know at some point, I was in toxic relationships, and one thing to help me get out, I was with God, and He still made bad choices, but I had to ask God to please create distance and space between me and that person, whether it was a boyfriend or a friend or whatever, because I realized I'm not strong enough to turn away myself, and I'm still making these bad moves, but Lord, I need the space because I'm around them so much that I'm still falling into the same old, same old. So Lord, please create that space, that distance that I need to get myself together in order to be able to get strong enough to move away.
That's good. I think you should always pray first, seek God's guidance, and then at the same time communicate with the person and let them know you negative. Everything that come out your mouth is so negative. Do you know that? Because I'm gonna say this: some people don't know they're doing it. You know what I mean? Some people at times can be like, "Oh, I didn't know. I mean, I've always talked this way." So I feel like if you communicate with them, tell them you're always negative, and if they don't fix it, then that's when you make a decision to say, you know what, I can't, because you just a whole nother vibe I can't deal with, and distance yourself.
And I think as far as a toxic marriage, because I was talking to a person yesterday, and they were in a toxic marriage, and they asked, it's like a brother, not my real brother, but it's like a brother to me, and he was asking for my advice, and he said he was going to walk away if whatever was said is true. And I was telling you can't just walk away from a marriage. I think that if you're in a toxic marriage and the other person's not putting their hands on you, then you can stay. I mean, you just have to deal with it, I mean, I don't think that you can just walk out your marriage. You made a vow. If they not fighting you that's how I feel. That's just me.
But
If
you know
they're
what?
not fighting you, I wouldn't leave.
So people have different values and people have different opinions. So when you go, and that's why it's so important. And I really do love Elder Sutton because she's a true she keeps the real, but at the same time, if she makes a commitment, she's going to keep her commitment, and it's not based on if you're wrong or not. You know what I mean? So I feel like there are people like that because this is why marriage is so important. It's not the fact that you get a ring and all that stuff. It's the vow to God, right? And I think a lot of people forget that they made a vow to God because even in the vows it says for better or for worse.
Wow.
So you know what I mean? So that can be a person's worst. So what, you gonna walk away from them because it's at their worst?
And that's exactly what I said to that person yesterday. I said, you said for better or for worse. You stood in front of a minister and your wife to be, but you also stood in front of God. And when you made that vow to God, it's not good to make a vow to God and turn back. It's just not good. And let me tell you, I was in the toxic one. I was in it. And I'm not ashamed to say it. It wasn't always toxic. The whole 40 years wasn't toxic, but it got that way. It got that way, and I could have walked out. But like I said, in my husband's home going, you don't have a towel to throw in. You drive with that towel and keep it moving. So we got to learn to take the bitter with the sweet.
Now, y'all speaking on, are we talking about mental talk? Because what about abuse? Like when you being abused, beat.
I said that.
Okay,
if you're being abused, that's a different story.
Okay,
No one's
all right,
gonna
I wanna
stay
make that
there
clear.
while you beating up on
Okay.
them. No, that's just you gonna get out of there. You gonna call the popo real quick,
But
and you're
what if
gonna
it's-
get out of that.
What if it's verbal abuse, not like somebody's not putting your hands on you, but every day you're a B, every day you're no good, every day you're, getting thrown under the bus, every day you can't do anything right. Do you stay and you take all of that?
I'm gonna tell you like my mom used to say back in the day: sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. They just bounce off. They hurt for a little bit and then they gone. They don't last. They don't just hang on you.
Toya, what you think?
I'm not married yet, so I can't really speak to that. But I would I imagine. Well, I think even in different type of relationships, like physical abuse, emotional abuse, I would say holds the same weight. Clearly, like if you are being physically abused, it could be deadly, which makes it worse than I think verbal abuse. But it's still like that emotional abuse is still abuse. And sometimes people don't have that strength or that rearing that they're strong enough to be able to navigate that, especially if they grew up in an abusive household. They were going through this their whole lives. Like this could lead someone to, wanting to take their own life or just being down in the dumps and being depressed all the time. And then like, how do they impact their children, or how are they in, when they go to work and things like that? Like it has a trickling effect. And I think that if you are in a covenant with God, like God should be in it. And then I believe in restoration. I believe that anything can be fixed. You can work on it, stick it out. But it takes two to tango is what you all say. But if both parties aren't trying, and it's been years of this, like, how long are you gonna suffer through? I can only speak for myself. Like, I don't, like, God would literally have to, like, get me through it. But I just don't believe that God would want me to live a life of abuse and suffering when he speaks nothing but, like, abundance and peace, and, like, that stuff isn't of God. So for me, I mean, I'm not condoning that people sit through things, but also I think that it's a person to person, and it's situational.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. When before you go, and again, that's marriage, right? And that can be different scenarios. I mean, even if you have a relationship with a girlfriend, if you have a relationship with your mother and father. But I feel like before you even get to the point of marriage, there had to be signs before you got to the vow. You know what I mean? So some people are so quick to say, I just, not saying that that's any of us, but what I'm saying is just general people want to be married, want to have a ring on their finger, want to be able to say my husband, want to be able to say my wife. But marriage to me, not married, never been married, but to me, marriage to me is something that is very sacred, and it's unto God. God honors marriage. And Toya's right. You don't want to get to a point in a relationship that you wake up every day and you wonder what the day is going to be like. You know what I mean? But I do, again, like, a person. So how does it get to the point where as if I'm suffering with this person for the rest of my life? Because there had to be a sign in the beginning. There had to be something, whether you saw it and whether you threw it behind your back, it just happened one time. Nothing happens just once.
They call them red flags, right? They had to be a red flag. Minister Rachel, I saw when she said that in the beginning, I saw something kind of sparking you. Go ahead.
So I was married before my husband, he passed, but we did it quick. And it wasn't because I wanted to be married so bad or whatever. I thought he was the one. And I was like, okay, and everything was vibing, everything was clicking. It was little things that I can, in retrospect, say that I ignored. Because we didn't do it under God, we did it at a courthouse. But those vows, I had to say to him more than one time, you better be lucky I said some vows, because I can do bad by myself. I'm out. I wasn't one to stay in something bad. Like, I'm not, after a certain point, I'm like, I'm done. But when I said those vows, I wanted to honor those vows. But being quick about things, not taking the time to do your research. One of my friends said that they do background checks. I said,
So you said as you should.
That never crossed my mind. Like, I'm dependent on this Holy Ghost, but they
It's
got
2022.
background. Yeah.
Toya said.
Checks.
No, you should. I mean, not even just with relationships with children. Like, you shouldn't be sending your children to someone's house, like their friends or a coach, without, like, doing background checks. Like, you need to know who your children are going to be around, because everybody, they look nice and friendly, but you don't know their history. You don't know if they've been locked up for child abuse or anything like that. Like, yeah, you got to be.
Yeah.
Finish. Go ahead.
I'm naive, but being in the midst of things, marriage was one of the hardest things that I ever tackled, and it brought me closer to God. It taught me how to pray sincerely, because now I have this man that I thought I knew that I don't know, and Lord, I chose this. Yeah. I'm not asking you to get me out of this, but please help me to handle this. And he taught me how to pray. He taught me how to pray and not worry. He gave me peace in storms, and that brought that man to the knowledge of Christ even greater, where I know he made it to heaven. I know I'll see him again. And it's like you have to choose wisely, though. You really do in those type relationships.
I think that's a good point. I mean, like I said, I'm not married or anything, but when you, a lot of people, everybody doesn't get married under God. They're taking vows, but you may at this point be a Christian or like trying to live a certain way, but some people may have been young, naive, like not even know Christ for themselves. And then when you start to change, or you start to see things aren't how you expected them to be, you want to hold this person accountable to stuff that they didn't commit to when y'all first started out. Like, this isn't with the life that y'all was living. So it takes work to, in that case, like, to that person to come to Christ as well, and to know God for themselves, or for you to rely on God to be able to see you through that. But everyone doesn't start like that, and that's not everyone's situation.
I'm not understanding.
Go ahead, Elder.
Why are you saying you didn't do this under God? Because you did it in a courthouse, it's not under God? Because you do it in someone's living room, it's not under God. You still have the same vows. Well, if you did it in the bathroom, you still got the same vows.
So my perception of under God, I wasn't in front of a preacher man. I was in front of a woman clerk, and a woman clerk, my husband was saying his vows to the woman clerk, and I got angry and I turned his head. It's like, who you saying your vows to? Like, it was in a courthouse.
But you're still saying them unto God. You made a vow.
God
to
wasn't.
this man.
everybody.
God wasn't in the.
God wasn't in your.
In the vows, is what I'm saying. I'm saying it wasn't in front. When I say under God, I'm saying it wasn't by a man or a woman of God. My marriage wasn't performed. It was performed by a licensed clerk of the county in Maryland.
So what she's saying, I think, to me, it sounds like what she's saying is it just wasn't in order. It wasn't in the order of how it's supposed to be, a godly order, right? You know, you show yourself to the priest. You know, you come and you say, we want to get married. That's the order, right? We want to go through marriage counseling, and we want to do this in order. And what she's saying, it was a different
And I'm also saying that, like, everybody isn't a Christian. Like, this is a
Yeah.
Christian show, which is great, but we don't know who is watching our show and what their experience is and how something that we may say may impact them to turn to God. So a lot of people, what I'm saying is that everybody isn't under God. Like, they may not have a relationship with God, and they were married, and then they come to God later on in life, or maybe they don't, but people, just because we're Christians doesn't mean that we won't suffer, and we, may deal with the same thing as the people of the world. So I think that what we're saying could be helpful for somebody Christian or not.
Let's talk about a toxic Christian home because, like we said, we are Christians. And we were talking before the show. I was talking with Elder Chantal, and you said something really pertinent. I said, what is an example of a toxic Christian home? And you said, or both of you all were saying about a person that preaches one thing in the pulpit and goes home and acts another, right? And I think you made another point, Toya.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, manipulating scripture. Like,
Manipulating
they're not
scripture.
living as an example, but they're trying to hold you accountable to it, or misusing it and trying to make it harmful for a person instead of building them up.
Okay, so let's start with the first one. A person that preaches a toxic Christian home. You preach one thing, you act one way in church, but you go home and you're a total different person. How does that affect your family?
So I think it shows you lose respect for the person because I think you come in and you become a whole different person. You praising God, giving God glory, honor, whatever, and then when you go home, you do a 360. You're evil, you're mean, you're corrupt. So to me, that causes issues in the home.
And I think for children, like, it's what they see. Like, you are their first example of God and what that looks like. And that's why in some cases people turn away from the church or turn away from God, not knowing it's really the people, it's not God that they should be turning away from, but that's how it happens because you go to church and you're this example in church, but then you come home and you're mean to me or you don't talk to me. Like, it's completely opposite. And it's like, who is this God that you serve? Like, no, that's not who God is in my life, like my reality. So that's why I think the conflict comes in, especially with children or just people that may not be mature in faith, that can turn them away easily.
And you have to be real careful what you let your children see you do and how you let them see you act. As far as me, I've been in church all my life. I did go out for a while. My sisters tricked me into doing things, and they got me one time. But my children, they can tell you they have never seen me take a drink. I smoke. They never seen me smoke, and they have never heard me cuss. They don't even know that part. You know that I did do that. I didn't drink, but I did cuss. I smoked. But my children never heard that. So a toxic relationship is what you bring into your household. And being a Christian, I always portrayed that. My children say they went to church 7 days a week. No, they did not. But we went to church. That's all we knew was church. I brought them up in church, and that's all they knew. So that's why they still in church, except for my youngest son. I don't know what happened to him, but he'll be okay. I'm praying for him. Yeah.
I would say, like, that's really good, but I think it's equally important to show people that you're not perfect, and so that they can see God in it. Like, that's wonderful that they never seen you cuss or like all of these different things, but it makes in some cases, it seemed unattainable. Like you have to be this perfect person or God won't love you. Like people can live in so much condemnation because of these messages of like, you have to be a certain way. And yeah, you should be a certain way in Christ. But I think it's equally important to show when you are weak, when you do fall, how do you come out of that? Like, are you seeking God? Like crying, like, I don't know the answers, but I'm crying. Like for children to see you weak and crying out to God, that helps them, because in life it's not going to be perfect. In life, you're going to fall. They need to know how to get back to God, or like why you even believe. Like, what is this? Not, oh, I'm living this perfect life and I'm an example, because that's just not realistic. Like they're going to school, they're seeing everything totally opposite of God. And it's like, how do I survive in it? How do I keep coming back to God when I'm supposed to be this perfect person, but my feelings are contradicting what it is that I'm supposed to do?
Yeah, I had that example growing up with my parents. I grew up knowing them as Christians. They brought us to church, and things that they did in the church, they did in the home. Things that, like, they prayed in church, we prayed at home. We had Bible study at home. My mom would get the kids going to school. They would stop at our house for prayer before going. In hard situations, I've seen, them come together and pray, but I've seen them argue. And I've seen all, but I've always seen them come back to love, and God is love. I've seen it, and so that is what rooted and grounded me in hanging in there with God, because I'm like, I had a great example, and I know it can be done.
Right.
Well,
That's
that's
why I
good.
came from a family. My mom and my dad, they were real good. Like she's saying, they argued. Yeah, they argued, but they always came back together. And I can truly say I had the best mom and dad that anybody could have, because they came back. They argued. They did little things in the household, like regular people do. We disagree. We agree to disagree, and we fuss. They didn't fight, but they fuss. Yeah. But yeah.
Or the flip side, I can be transparent and say, my parents were in church, but I grew up in a household where they were not. My parents argued all the time. They weren't, they weren't lovey-dovey towards each other. They were very, very distant. So much so, I remember when I went to one of my friends' houses. And I was a little girl, must have been about 10, 12, something like that. And I remember the father came in the house, and he went to the mother, and he like hugged her and gave her a big kiss. And I was like, whoa, like that's what people. But I didn't know, because my norm was my father came in the house and didn't even speak. My parents didn't even, they just were like roommates, right? I didn't know that wasn't normal growing up. That was my normal. So when I went to their house, it was like, wow, this is what they do. The family ate dinner together. I didn't grow up like that, right? So the question I have for you is, how does that affect, a person who you came out of a great home and you didn't? How does it affect the person that doesn't? Does that mean that you're automatically going to have, or you'll be accustomed to the norm of toxic behavior in your relationship as you grow up? Or no?
I think it's case by case. Okay. Some people is like, because I experienced this as a child, I refuse to do it as an adult. Like, I'm going to break this generational curse. Like, I'm going to make sure that my family, loves each other and shows affection. And like, because they didn't receive it, they work so hard to try to achieve it when they have the power to do so. Other people, because that's all they know, that's all they know. So it's like, they will accept a lot of things because it's like, oh yeah, this is normal. Like my mother and father were like this, or whoever my guardians were, like this is how it's supposed to be. And I think that that's just a lack of exposure or just their experience. So I think it can go either way.
I think that the person, it depends on the two people that's in the relationship. I could have come from a good home where they didn't argue, but the person I married could have came from a broken family. So that's all they know. So they inflicted that into the marriage or into the relationship.
I wasn't raised with two-parent household, so I was just raised with my mother, and my mother did the best that she could do. And I think a lot of times it's great when you have people who have parents, whether they get along or they don't get along. Not saying that it's great that they don't get along, but when you come from a single family household, my mother had 3 children, and she raised us the best that she can do. Now, I've seen my mother transition from being single to being married to being divorced. But in all of that, I thank God for God's grace, because you're right, there's a choice, it's a case-by-case situation, but then God puts upon you some type of wisdom or understanding. When I was with my grandmother, she took us to church all the time, old school. We was in church all the time. Even though I was in the back of the pew sleeping, I still believe that, I still heard God, and even to this day, I can remember back, as a little girl, how God really moves. So me saying that is everybody has a different situation. Whether you come from a two-parent household, whether you come from a single mother or a single father, I believe that everybody has a choice. But at the end of the day, when you acknowledge what's wrong in your past, that you don't want to bring that into your relationship, I think you can be successful in that. I think a lot of times we just don't acknowledge, I'm a mess, and I'm going to make you a mess. But I believe when you do that, things start to spread, and it gets into your children. And then it becomes a generational curse because you never took the time to cleanse out that part of your life. And sometimes you got to say, look, I'm toxic in this area. I'm not good in this and I need help. And I just think you have to learn from who you are and not spread or become that person of wickedness to go in to make it into another person's life to tell them this is the thing you should do.
Yeah, and I just want to say, some people who do have that two-parent support household, you don't always make the best choices.
Right.
Them generational curses do creep up, and you do end up going your own path and making some toxic choices, yourself.
As we got about 2.5 minutes left in the show, let's talk about healing, because at the end of the day, that's what we want, right? We want to be healed so that we can be able to have great relationships with everyone in our families, co-workers and things like that. So how do we heal from the toxic behavior that we've experienced, that we're going through now? Elder Sutton.
I think by just talking to God and asking God to heal us, because God is the healer, and he can heal us not only from sickness, but he can heal things from our mind. So I got through mine by just praying to God, and I asked God, and I forgave for what, was done to me. And I just asked God to heal me and not let me dwell on this the rest of my life.
I would say that, and also in asking God to show you. Like, you can only control yourself. The hope is that you and whoever the person is, be it your child or your husband or your wife, that God would reveal themselves to them as well, so that you can start doing your own work of trying to evolve or become a better person, a better example, a better mother, father, whoever. And then as that happens, you as a unit, I feel like, will get closer, because you need to know your triggers. Like, why is this bothering me? Why do I snap? Or why do I treat that person that way? Like, what's happening in me that's causing me to react this way? Like, yeah, they might have tempted me or whatever, but why am I reacting this way? And I think once you get to the root of your own work, then you'll be a better person, and in turn, the other person, you could be an example for them to change as well.
For me, it was having a true confidant, like someone I can trust to kind of let my feelings out to, like a sounding board, and knowing it wouldn't go anywhere, and also letting it out to God. But if you don't have that, someone you can trust, always depend on God, because he can heal you, he can deliver. And you said it, forgiving them and forgiving yourself.
Let a man examine himself, and God will show you the way.
Well, we pray this show has blessed you and been informative to you. We thank God for our man of God, Pastor Tony Smith, for allowing us to be before you today. We invite you to be a part of our church services each and every Sunday, 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Wednesdays, we have service at 12 noon and at 6 p.m. Until then, we will see you next time for more conversations.